Karen Miller walked into her classroom that Tuesday morning with a heavy bag full of papers to grade and a coffee that had already gone cold. She had been teaching math at Lincoln High School for 12 years, and she thought she had seen everything. Her advanced calculus class was always her biggest challenge of the day. These were the smart kids, the ones who planned to go to good colleges, but they still complained whenever she gave them something really hard to solve. The morning sun came through the tall windows of room 204, making long shadows across the rows of empty desks. Karen set her things down and looked at the whiteboard. Today she had planned something special for her third period class. She had found a problem in an old college textbook that was so difficult she wasn't even sure some college students could solve it. It was a differential equation with multiple steps that required several different math skills all put together. She wrote the problem on the board in her neat handwriting. The numbers and symbols filled up almost half the whiteboard. Even looking at it made her smile a little. This would definitely get her students thinking, or at least it would show them how much more they still had to learn. At exactly 10:15, her students began walking into the classroom. There was Jenny Adams, who always sat in the front row and asked too many questions. Behind her came Tony Martinez, who was good at math but lazy about homework. Sarah Johnson walked in, talking loudly to her friend Katie about some drama from lunch. The usual group of 23 students filled the room with their morning energy. Karen waited for them to settle down before pointing to the whiteboard. "Good morning, everyone. I hope you're ready for a real challenge today." The students looked at the board and their faces changed. Some of them groaned out loud. Others just stared with their mouths open. "Mrs. Miller, what is that?" asked Jenny, squinting at the complex equation. "This is a differential equation that you might see in a college advanced calculus class," Karen explained. "I want you to work in groups and see how far you can get with it." Tony raised his hand. "Are you serious? This looks impossible." "That's exactly the point," Karen said with a grin. "Sometimes we need to see really difficult problems to appreciate how much we still need to learn." The students groaned again and started moving their desks together to form groups. Karen watched them struggle with the problem for about 20 minutes. She could see they were getting frustrated. Some groups had given up completely and were just talking about other things. A few students were still trying, but they weren't making much progress. Outside in the hallway, Danny Rodriguez was doing his morning cleaning. Danny was 43 years old and had been working as the night janitor at Lincoln High School for almost 8 years. He was a quiet man who did his job well and never caused any problems. Most of the teachers knew his name, but not many of them had ever had a real conversation with him. Danny pushed his cleaning cart slowly down the hall, stopping to empty trash cans and wipe down the drinking fountains. He had started working at 6 a.m., and he would be done by 2 p.m. just before the afternoon classes ended. It was steady work with good benefits, and it helped him take care of his family. As Danny worked near room 204, he could hear the students inside getting louder and more frustrated. Through the open door, he could see them pointing at the whiteboard and shaking their heads. He had seen this before in other math classes. When students got stuck on hard problems, they sometimes got upset or gave up completely. Karen noticed that her students were starting to lose focus. She walked around the room trying to encourage different groups, but she could tell they were all stuck. The problem really was very difficult, maybe too difficult for high school students. "This is crazy hard, Mrs. Miller," said Sarah, throwing her pencil down on her desk. "Nobody can solve this." "Yeah, this is impossible," agreed Katie. "Even college kids probably couldn't do this." Karen looked at the frustrated faces around the room. Maybe she had made the problem too hard. She had wanted to challenge them, but she didn't want to make them feel bad about themselves. She was thinking about what to say when she noticed Danny outside in the hallway. Danny was mopping the floor near her classroom door, working quietly as always. He wore his usual navy blue work shirt and dark pants. His cleaning cart was neat and organized just like everything else he did. Then Karen got an idea. It was a silly idea, maybe even a mean one, but she thought it might help her students understand just how difficult the problem really was. If she could show them that even a regular person like Danny would find it impossible, maybe they wouldn't feel so bad about not being able to solve it themselves. "Hey, Danny," Karen called out through the open door. Her voice was loud enough for all her students to hear. Danny stopped mopping and looked up. "Yes, Mrs. Miller? Want to come in here and try to solve this math problem? My students think it's too hard for anyone to do." The classroom got very quiet. All 23 students turned to look at Danny. Some of them started to smile, thinking their teacher was making a joke. Others looked uncomfortable, like they weren't sure if it was nice to put Danny on the spot like this. Danny stood still for a moment, holding his mop. He looked at Karen, then at all the students staring at him. Most people in his situation would have just laughed and said something like, "I'm not good at math," or "That's not my job." But Danny didn't do what most people would do. Instead, he leaned his mop against the wall and took a step toward the classroom door. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked quietly. Karen was surprised. She had expected Danny to laugh or make a joke and go back to his cleaning. She hadn't expected him to actually want to try the problem. But now that she had asked, she couldn't really say no. "Sure," she said, feeling a little confused. "Come on in." Danny walked into the classroom, leaving his cleaning cart in the hallway. The students watched every step he took. The room was so quiet that everyone could hear the sound of his work boots on the floor. He walked up to the whiteboard and stood in front of the complex equation that had been frustrating Karen's advanced students all morning. He studied it carefully, his eyes moving across the numbers and symbols. What happened next would change everything. Danny stood in front of the whiteboard for almost a minute without saying anything. The 23 students in Karen's class watched him with curious eyes. Some of them were still smiling, thinking this was all just a funny joke. Others looked worried, like they felt sorry for Danny and didn't want to see him embarrassed. Karen felt a little uncomfortable too. She had called Danny into the classroom as a way to show her students how hard the problem was, but now she was wondering if she had made a mistake. Danny seemed to be taking this seriously, and she didn't want to hurt his feelings. "Danny, you don't have to actually try it," Karen said softly. "I was just kidding around." But Danny didn't seem to hear her. He was completely focused on the equation written on the board. His eyes moved slowly from left to right, reading every number and symbol carefully. It was like he was reading a book instead of looking at a math problem. Jenny Adams, who always sat in the front row, whispered to her friend, "What's he doing? Does he really think he can solve it?" Tony Martinez laughed quietly and said, "This should be interesting." Danny finally turned around to face the class. "Could I borrow a marker?" he asked Karen. Karen was surprised again. She had expected Danny to look at the problem for a few seconds, shake his head, and say it was too hard. Instead, he was asking for a marker like he actually planned to work on it. "Are you sure?" Karen asked. "This is a really difficult college-level problem." "I'd like to try," Danny said simply. Karen handed him a blue marker from her desk. The students leaned forward in their seats to get a better view. The room was quieter than it had been all morning. Danny turned back to the whiteboard and started writing, but he didn't start working on the problem right away. Instead, he wrote some smaller equations off to the side of the main problem. The students watched as he wrote down what looked like basic math formulas. "What's he doing?" Sarah Johnson whispered to Katie. "I have no idea," Katie whispered back. Danny worked quietly for several minutes. He wrote down different equations and crossed some of them out. He drew arrows connecting different parts of his work. It looked organized and careful, not like someone who was just guessing. Karen watched from her desk, feeling more confused by the minute. Danny's handwriting was neat and clear. The way he organized his work on the board looked professional, like he had done this many times before. This wasn't what she had expected at all. After about 5 minutes of preparation work, Danny started on the main problem. He rewrote the original equation in a slightly different way, making it easier to read. Then he began applying mathematical rules that Karen recognized from her college classes. The first step Danny took was something called integration by parts. Karen knew this technique, but it was advanced even for her calculus students. Danny wrote out each step clearly, showing his work just like a good student would do. "Wait," Jenny said out loud. "Is he actually solving this?" Some of the other students started paying closer attention. They could see that Danny wasn't just making random marks on the board. He was following real mathematical steps, and his answer was starting to make sense. Danny continued working. He used substitution methods and applied several different calculus rules. Each step he took was correct. Karen knew because she had solved this problem herself the night before to make sure it was possible. The strangest part was how calm Danny seemed. Her students usually got stressed and frustrated when working on hard problems. They would erase things and start over multiple times. But Danny worked steadily and confidently, like he knew exactly what he was doing. "Mrs. Miller," Tony said, raising his hand. "How does he know how to do this?" Karen didn't have an answer. She was watching Danny's work as carefully as her students were, and she was just as amazed as they were. Danny had now filled up most of the empty space on the whiteboard with his calculations. His work was organized into clear sections, and he had labeled each step so it was easy to follow. It looked like the kind of work she might see from her best college students, not from the school janitor. After about 12 more minutes, Danny stepped back from the board. He looked over his work one more time, checking each step carefully. Then he turned to face the class. "I think that's the answer," he said quietly, pointing to a final equation he had written in a box at the bottom right of the board. Karen looked at the answer and felt her mouth drop open. It was correct. Not only was it correct, but Danny had solved the problem using a method that was actually more elegant and efficient than the way she had solved it herself. The classroom was completely silent. 23 students stared at the whiteboard, then at Danny, then back at the whiteboard. Nobody seemed to know what to say. Jenny was the first to speak. "Did he really just solve that?" "I think he did," said Tony, sounding amazed. Sarah and Katie looked at each other with wide eyes. Other students were whispering and pointing at the board. Karen walked up to the whiteboard to check Danny's work more carefully. She followed each step, looking for mistakes, but she couldn't find any. The solution was not only correct, but beautifully done. "Danny," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "this is incredible. Where did you learn to do this?" Danny set the marker down on Karen's desk and picked up the eraser. He started cleaning off his work from the board like it was no big deal. "Just something I picked up over the years," he said simply. "Thanks for letting me try it." He erased all of his calculations until the board looked just like it had when he first walked into the room. The only difference was that now everyone in the classroom knew that the impossible problem could be solved, and it had been solved by someone they never would have expected. Danny walked toward the door, ready to go back to his cleaning work. But before he could leave, Karen called after him. "Danny, wait. Could you stay for just a minute? I think we need to talk." But Danny was already walking back to his cleaning cart in the hallway. "I should get back to work," he said. "The floors won't clean themselves." He picked up his mop and continued down the hallway like nothing unusual had happened. The students could hear the wheels of his cleaning cart squeaking as he moved to the next classroom. Karen stood at the front of her classroom, staring at the empty whiteboard where Danny had just performed what seemed like magic. Her students sat in their seats, still trying to process what they had witnessed. "Mrs. Miller," Jenny said finally. "Who is that guy?" Karen couldn't focus on teaching for the rest of the day. After Danny left her classroom, her students had asked question after question about what they had just seen. She tried to continue with her regular lesson plan, but her mind kept going, back to the way Danny had solved that impossible problem. During lunch break, Karen sat in the teacher's lounge with her sandwich untouched on the table in front of her. The other teachers were talking about normal things like weekend plans and difficult students, but Karen couldn't stop thinking about Danny. She had worked at Lincoln High School for 12 years, and Danny had been the janitor for 8 of those years. How could she have never known that he could do advanced mathematics? She decided she had to find out more. After lunch, Karen walked through the hallways looking for Danny. She found him in the maintenance room in the basement of the school, organizing cleaning supplies on metal shelves. The maintenance room was small and windowless, with concrete walls painted white. There were bottles of cleaning chemicals, boxes of toilet paper, and stacks of paper towels everywhere. Danny was counting rolls of paper towels and writing numbers on a clipboard. "Danny," Karen said, knocking on the open door. Could I talk to you for a minute? Danny looked up from his clipboard. He seemed surprised to see her. Sure, Mrs. Miller, is everything okay? Did I forget to clean something in your classroom? No, nothing like that, Karen said quickly. I wanted to ask you about what happened this morning, that math problem you solved. Danny set his clipboard down on a small desk covered with work schedules and supply orders. What about it? Karen stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. She wanted to have this conversation in private. Danny, where did you learn to solve calculus problems like that? That wasn't basic math. That was college-level mathematics. Danny was quiet for a moment. He picked up a bottle of floor cleaner and pretended to read the label, but Karen could tell he was thinking about what to say. I've always been interested in math, he said finally. But Danny, you solved that problem better than most college students could. You used techniques that I learned in graduate school. That's not something you pick up as a hobby. Danny put the bottle back on the shelf and sat down in the old chair behind the desk. He looked tired, like this conversation was something he had been avoiding for a long time. It's complicated, he said. Karen pulled up a folding chair and sat down across from him. I have time, and I'm really curious. Danny was quiet again for almost a minute. Karen could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights and the sound of students walking around upstairs. Finally, Danny started talking. I used to be a graduate student, he said. A long time ago. I was working on my PhD in mathematics at Ohio State University. Karen felt her eyes widen. You were getting a PhD in math? I was trying to, Danny said. I had finished my master's degree and was about 3 years into my doctoral program. I was studying applied mathematics, focusing on differential equations and mathematical modeling. It was everything I had ever wanted to do. What happened? Karen asked gently. Danny looked down at his hands. My wife Lisa got sick. Really sick. She had cancer, and the doctors weren't sure if she was going to make it. We had 2 little kids at home, Emma and Carlos. Emma was 7 and Carlos was 5. Karen felt her heart sink. She was starting to understand. I had to make a choice, Danny continued. I could keep working on my PhD and hope that Lisa would get better on her own, or I could drop out of school and take care of my family. It wasn't really a choice at all. So you left graduate school? I left everything, Danny said. I quit school, and I started working whatever jobs I could find that had good health insurance. Lisa needed expensive treatments, and we had to make sure the kids were taken care of. I worked at a factory for a while, then at a grocery store. Then I got this job here at the school. Karen sat back in her chair. She was starting to see Danny in a completely different way. This quiet man who cleaned her classroom every day had once been a graduate student studying advanced mathematics. Did Lisa get better? Karen asked. Danny smiled for the first time since they had started talking. She did. It took almost 2 years of treatment, but the cancer went away. She's been healthy for over 10 years now. She works at the bank downtown. That's wonderful, Karen said. But Danny, why didn't you go back to school after she got better? Danny shrugged. Life got in the way. By the time Lisa was healthy again, the kids were older and settled in their schools here in town. Emma was in high school and Carlos was in middle school. They had friends and activities, and Lisa had her job at the bank. We had built a life here. But what about your PhD? What about your dreams? The PhD program moved on without me, Danny said. My advisor retired, and the research I was doing became outdated. Starting over seemed impossible. Besides, this job pays well and has great benefits. We were able to buy a house and save money for the kids' college. Emma just graduated from nursing school last year, and Carlos is studying engineering. Karen shook her head. Danny, you're brilliant. You shouldn't be working as a janitor. Danny looked at her seriously. There's nothing wrong with being a janitor, Mrs. Miller. It's honest work and it helps people. I keep this school clean and safe for all the students and teachers. That's important too. Karen felt embarrassed. I didn't mean it that way. I just meant that you have so much talent in mathematics. I still use it, Danny said. I work on math problems at home sometimes, just for fun. I read math journals online and try to keep up with new developments. Old habits die hard, I guess. You read math journals for fun? Danny laughed. I know it sounds weird, but I enjoy it. It's like doing crossword puzzles except with numbers and equations. Karen was amazed. For 8 years she had said hello to Danny in the hallways and thanked him for cleaning her classroom, never knowing that he probably understood mathematics better than she did. "Danny, would you be interested in helping some of my students?" she asked. "I have kids who struggle with calculus, and after what I saw today, I think you could really help them." Danny looked uncertain. "I don't know, Mrs. Miller. I'm not a teacher." "You don't have to be a teacher to help kids learn," Karen said. "Sometimes the best help comes from someone who understands what it's like to struggle." Danny thought about it for a moment. "Maybe I could help a little bit, if you think it would be useful." Karen smiled. "I think it would be very useful. Those kids have no idea how lucky they're about to be." Karen tried to keep Danny's secret, but it was too big to keep quiet. The next morning, she arrived at school early and went straight to the main office to talk to Principal Robert Carter. She found him at his desk, drinking coffee and reading through emails on his computer. "Robert, I need to tell you something incredible about Danny Rodriguez," Karen said, closing the office door behind her. Principal Carter looked up from his computer. He was a friendly man in his 50s who had been running Lincoln High School for 6 years. He knew every student and teacher by name, and he cared deeply about everyone who worked at the school. "What about Danny?" he asked. "Is there a problem?" "No problem," Karen said. "But you're not going to believe what happened in my classroom yesterday." She told Principal Carter the whole story. She described how she had jokingly asked Danny to solve the impossible math problem, how he had worked through it step by step, and how he had found the correct answer in less than 20 minutes. Then she told him about their conversation in the maintenance room and Danny's background as a graduate student. Principal Carter listened with his mouth open. When Karen finished talking, he sat back in his chair and shook his head slowly. "You're telling me that Danny, our night janitor, was working on a PhD in mathematics?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Karen said. "And Robert, he's brilliant. I mean, really, truly brilliant. The way he solved that problem was better than anything I've seen from college students." Principal Carter was quiet for a moment, thinking. Why didn't he ever tell anyone about his background? "He's humble," Karen said. "He doesn't think his past matters. He's happy doing his job and taking care of his family." "But Karen, this is amazing. We have a mathematical genius working in our school, and we never knew it." "I know. And I think we should find a way to use his talents to help our students." Principal Carter agreed. By the end of the week, several other teachers had heard the story. Karen had told Lisa Barnes, the chemistry teacher, during lunch on Wednesday. Lisa had been struggling to explain some complex chemical equations to her advanced chemistry class, and Karen thought Danny might be able to help. "You want me to ask the janitor for help with chemistry?" Lisa had asked, sounding confused. "Trust me," Karen said. "Just try it." Lisa found Danny that afternoon while he was cleaning the science lab. She felt awkward at first, but she explained her problem. She was trying to teach her students about reaction rates and equilibrium constants, but the mathematical part was giving them trouble. Danny listened carefully and then asked to see the equations she was working with. Within minutes, he had explained the mathematical concepts in a way that made perfect sense. He even suggested a different approach that would be easier for high school students to understand. "How do you know so much about chemistry?" Lisa asked. "Math is everywhere," Danny said simply. "Chemistry, physics, economics, biology, it's all connected by mathematics." The story spread even further when Greg Collins, the history teacher, overheard Lisa telling another teacher about Danny's help with chemistry. Greg was curious, so he approached Danny the next day. "Danny, I heard you know a lot about mathematics. I'm teaching a unit about the history of science, and some of my students are asking questions about old mathematical discoveries. Could you help me understand some of these concepts better?" Danny not only helped Greg understand the mathematical concepts, but he also knew fascinating stories about the mathematicians and scientists who had made important discoveries throughout history. He told Greg about ancient Greek mathematicians, medieval Islamic scholars, and European scientists from the Renaissance. "Where did you learn all this?" Greg asked. "When you study mathematics seriously, You learn about its history too, Danny explained. You can't really understand modern math without knowing where it came from. Soon, even Nancy Wright, the school librarian, had heard about Danny's knowledge. She discovered that Danny had been quietly reading advanced mathematics journals during his lunch breaks, using the computers in the library to access research papers online. Danny, I had no idea you were reading these journals, Nancy said one day when she found him at a computer reading an article about topology. I hope that's okay, Danny said. I try to keep up with new developments in mathematics. It helps me stay sharp. Of course it's okay, Nancy said. But I'm curious. Do you understand all of this technical language? Danny nodded. Most of it. Sometimes I have to look up new terms, but the basic concepts are familiar. Nancy was amazed. She had been a librarian for 20 years, and she had never met anyone who read mathematics journals for fun. Meanwhile, the students were starting to notice that something was different about Danny. It started with Jenny Adams, who had been in Karen's classroom when Danny solved the impossible problem. Jenny had been struggling with her calculus homework, and she remembered how easily Danny had worked through the difficult equation. On Thursday afternoon, Jenny saw Danny cleaning the hallway near her locker. She worked up the courage to approach him. Mr. Rodriguez, she said nervously. Could I ask you a question about math? Danny stopped mopping and looked at her with kind eyes. Of course, what's the problem? Jenny showed him her homework assignment. It was a calculus problem involving integration, and she couldn't figure out where to start. Danny looked at the problem for a few seconds, then began explaining the solution in simple terms that Jenny could understand. You start by identifying what type of function you're working with, he said. Then you choose the right technique for that type of function. Think of it like choosing the right tool for a job. Within 10 minutes, Jenny understood not only how to solve that specific problem, but also how to approach similar problems in the future. She thanked Danny and hurried off to class, excited to show her friends what she had learned. Word spread quickly among the students. By Friday, several students were quietly asking Danny for help with their math homework. They would find him during his breaks or approach him in the hallways between classes. Danny was always patient and helpful. He never made students feel stupid for not understanding something, and he had a gift for explaining complicated ideas in simple ways. The students began to call him Mr. Danny instead of just Danny, showing him a new level of respect. Some teachers were worried at first. They thought students might stop paying attention in class if they could just ask Danny for help instead. But Karen noticed that the students who worked with Danny actually became more engaged in their regular classes. They asked better questions and showed more confidence in their math abilities. Danny isn't replacing what we do in class, Karen explained to the other teachers. He's reinforcing it. He helps students understand concepts they missed, so they can participate better when they come to class. By the end of that first week, Danny's secret was no longer a secret. Everyone at Lincoln High School knew that their quiet janitor was actually a mathematical genius. But Danny continued to do his cleaning work with the same dedication as always. He still arrived at 6 a.m. and worked until 2 p.m., keeping the school spotless and safe for everyone. The only difference was that now, between emptying trash cans and mopping floors, Danny was also helping students discover the beauty and power of mathematics. He had found a way to use his talents to help others, even while continuing the job that supported his family. For Danny, it felt like the best of both worlds. He could use his love of mathematics to help young people learn, while still providing for his wife Lisa and being there for his children. It wasn't the life he had originally planned, but it was turning out to be pretty wonderful anyway. 3 weeks after Danny solved the impossible math problem, Karen was having dinner with her old college roommate, Patricia Lewis. They met at a small restaurant downtown, catching up on their lives like they did every few months. Patricia worked as a recruitment coordinator at Riverside Community College, about 30 minutes away from Lincoln High School. You won't believe what happened at my school, Karen said as they waited for their food to arrive. We discovered that our janitor is actually a mathematical genius, Patricia laughed. What do you mean? Karen told her the whole story about Danny. She explained how he had solved the advanced calculus problem, how she had learned about his background as a graduate student, and how he had been helping students and teachers around the school. Patricia stopped laughing and started listening very carefully. As someone who worked in college recruitment, she knew how rare it was to find people with Danny's level of mathematical knowledge. "Karen, are you serious about all this?" Patricia asked. "This man really understands advanced mathematics?" "I'm completely serious," Karen said. "I've seen his work myself. He's better at calculus than most of my colleagues who teach it." Patricia was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We've been looking for someone to teach remedial mathematics at our college. We have a lot of students who struggle with basic math concepts, and we need someone who can connect with them and help them succeed." "Danny would be perfect for that," Karen said. "He's patient, he explains things clearly, and he understands what it's like to have obstacles in life." "Do you think he would be interested in teaching?" Patricia asked. "I don't know," Karen admitted. "He seems happy with his current job, but it wouldn't hurt to ask." Patricia thought about it throughout dinner. The more she considered the idea, the more excited she became. Riverside Community College served many students who came from difficult backgrounds. They had people who were returning to school after years of working, single parents trying to improve their lives, and young people who hadn't done well in high school. These students needed teachers who understood their struggles and could help them succeed. The next Monday, Patricia called Karen at school. "I've been thinking about your friend Danny all weekend," she said. "Would it be possible for me to meet him?" Karen talked to Danny that afternoon while he was organizing supplies in the maintenance room. She told him about her conversation with Patricia and explained about the job opportunity at Riverside Community College. Danny was surprised and a little nervous. "I don't know, Mrs. Miller. I've never been a real teacher. Working with a few high school students is different from teaching a whole college class." "But Danny, you're a natural teacher," Karen said. "I've watched you help students, and you have a gift for making complicated things seem simple." "What about my job here?" Danny asked. "I can't just leave. This school depends on me, and my family depends on this income." Karen had already thought about that problem. "What if you could do both, at least at first? You could keep working here and teach just 1 or 2 classes in the evening. That way you could try it out without giving up your security." Danny agreed to meet with Patricia, mostly because Karen had been so kind to him and he didn't want to disappoint her. They arranged to meet at the school the following Wednesday afternoon. Patricia arrived at Lincoln High School at 3 p.m., just as Danny was finishing his regular cleaning duties. Karen introduced them in the teacher's lounge, which was empty at that time of day. Patricia was impressed with Danny from the moment they started talking. He was humble and thoughtful, but when she asked him about mathematics, his knowledge was obvious. She showed him some sample problems that her remedial math students typically struggled with, and Danny immediately understood the difficulties students might have with these concepts. "The problem with the way this is presented," Danny said, looking at one of the worksheets, "is that it jumps too quickly from basic arithmetic to algebraic thinking. Students need more steps in between to build their confidence." Patricia nodded. This was exactly the kind of insight she was looking for. "Danny, would you be interested in teaching one evening class at our college?" she asked. "It would be basic algebra for students who are returning to school after being away for a while. Many of them are afraid of math and don't believe they can succeed." Danny thought about it carefully. "I understand what that feels like," he said. "I've been away from academic mathematics for a long time myself. Sometimes I wonder if I still have what it takes." "That's exactly why you'd be perfect for this job," Patricia said. "You understand their fears because you've had similar fears yourself." Danny talked to his wife Lisa that evening about the opportunity. Lisa had always known about his mathematical background, and she had sometimes wondered if he missed academic work. "Do you want to try teaching?" she asked. "I think I do," Danny said. "But I'm scared. What if I'm not good at it? What if the students don't respect me because I'm just a janitor?" "You're not just a janitor," Lisa said firmly. "You're a man who chose to take care of his family when they needed him. That doesn't make you less intelligent or less valuable. If anything, it makes you more qualified to help students who are facing their own challenges." With Lisa's encouragement, Danny decided to try teaching one class. He would teach basic algebra, on Tuesday and Thursday evenings while continuing his full-time job at Lincoln High School. His first class was terrifying. 15 students sat in the classroom, looking at him with uncertain expressions. Most of them were older than traditional, college students. There was Maria, a single mother of 3 who was trying to get her nursing degree. There was Tom, a factory worker who wanted to learn new skills after being laid off from his job. There was Sandra, a woman in her 50s who had always been afraid of math but needed to pass algebra to get her business degree. Danny stood at the front of the classroom feeling more nervous than he had ever felt in his life. But then he remembered something important. These students were just like him. They were people who had faced obstacles and were trying to improve their lives through education. "My name is Danny Rodriguez," he said to the class. "I want you to know that I understand what it's like to be afraid of mathematics. I also understand what it's like to have your education interrupted by life circumstances. But I'm here because I believe that anyone can learn math if it's taught in the right way." By the end of that first semester, Danny's class had the highest success rate of any remedial math class at Riverside Community College. His students didn't just pass their exams, they gained confidence in their ability to learn difficult concepts. Word of Danny's success spread quickly through the college. Within a year, Patricia offered him a full-time teaching position with benefits that were even better than his janitor job. The college also offered to help him finish his PhD through a partnership program with the state university. Danny was torn about leaving Lincoln High School. The students there had grown to depend on his help, and he felt loyal to the school that had given him steady work for 8 years. Principal Carter called him into the office for a conversation. "Danny, you need to take this opportunity," he said. "You have a gift for teaching, and you can help many more students at the college than you can here." "But what about Lincoln High?" Danny asked. "What about the students here who need help with math?" "We'll work something out," Principal Carter promised. "Maybe you can come back as a volunteer tutor on weekends, or maybe you can help train other staff members to assist students with math." 2 years later, Danny Rodriguez was Dr. Danny Rodriguez. With a completed PhD and a full-time position as an associate professor of mathematics at Riverside Community College. He specialized in helping students who had struggled with math in the past, and his classes were always full with waiting lists. He never forgot his roots at Lincoln High School. Every few months he would return to visit, speaking to students about the importance of education and perseverance. He would tell them that success isn't about where you start in life, but about never giving up on your dreams. The maintenance room where he had once organized cleaning supplies was now used for storage, but Principal Carter had put up a small plaque on the door that read, "Dr. Danny Rodriguez worked here 2017-2025. He proved that greatness can be found anywhere." And in his office at Riverside Community College, Danny kept a simple mop hanging on the wall as a reminder of the journey that had brought him to where he belonged.